The Weekly Harvest, an in-depth look at the Brandon Wheat Kings and the WHL.
Washman trying to come up with it for Allison. Here's Allison right in front. He scores!
Brandon Junior hockey fans, you've waited 2 decades for this. In the league's 50th anniversary, your Wheat Kings are the champions.
Good looking chair, Ray.
And we are live. Welcome to the Weekly Harvest Podcast. My name is Chris Falko, Director of Game Day Operations, Community Relations with the Brandon Wheat Kings. He's Brandon Crowe, the voice of the Brandon Wheat Kings. And right off the bat, as you can see if you are watching live to the live stream version of the podcast, right below us, we are joined by 2 guys who both have Wheat King ties, both greats in their own industry. Excited to get into both their stories. We're joined right off the bat with Ray Ferraro and Darren Dreger. Thanks, guys, for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we're trying to keep busy, and as you guys know, this is the new norm. And you guys doing TV hits, and I'm sure other podcasts and everything to keep yourself busy. So aside from that, I'll start with you, Dregs, because we kind of were talking to Ray a little bit before. What outside of work have you been doing to keep yourself busy and sane during this crazy time?
Growing a goatee. Yeah, maintaining the goatee. I've had a couple of haircuts, walking the dog a lot. It's so damn cold here that the grass doesn't even grow. So, I can't even exercise my right as a proud Western Canadian. I'm getting out there and making things grow because it's just too cold to have any of that stuff happen here in Ontario at the moment. But no, aside from that, it's business as usual. You're right. I mean, Ray and I are constantly on search for, some interesting Ray and Dregs hockey podcast guests. And in the meantime, we've got insider trading twice a week and other elements, radio hits and whatnot that actually keep us pretty active, I would say 5 of the 7 days a week.
With all this, would you actually say that in some respects that you're almost a little bit more busy at times, it seems?
I am, no question about that. And Ray can jump in on this too, because I feel like we're the 2 hardest working people right now at TSN.
I think we need a new agent is what needs to happen. I feel like it's almost relentless. Like I look at my schedule every day, and outside of the travel, for me, I'm really busy. Now, of course, it's not manual labor or anything like that, but you're trying to keep up with what's going on. And there's always, as of late, certainly there's lots going on. Dregs and I right now, had things been on a normal timetable, we'd be in Switzerland for the World Hockey Championships, but I do 3 radio hits a day. I've got the podcast. This past week, I was taping segments for that Canada 7 team that TSN put out, the 7 Canadian teams. And so there's always something going on. And, I've got 2 small kids. We're trying to homeschool, which we are no good at. And they have worn us down. The 13 and the 10-year-old, they've worn us down. So it's basically like keep yourself upright, and we'll try and get to tomorrow.
Yeah, I've got 2 small children as well. One's 21 and the other one is 18 and a half, and I'm tired of both of them.
Have they moved back in with you, Darren?
Yeah.
So your grocery bill is through the roof, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is. Look, you got to do what you got to do. Initially, it was kind of fun because, you're used to not having your kids around you, and then automatically, they're there all day long. And it was fun for the first 6 weeks, and now it's less fun, and we're starting to pick at each other. So they're probably just as eager for the world to get back to whatever normal is than I am to have them get back to whatever normal is. But no, it's been good.
What about this though? Like, was everybody like watching shows together and playing games and all that stuff when this started? Because we were. Now I'm like, I don't want to watch TV anymore. I'm sick of it. The only thing I'm watching, honestly, is the Jordan documentary. Like, I don't watch. I was like, what series should I watch next? And I'm like, I don't want to watch any more series. We don't play any more board games. We're all tired of playing board games. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a show, Deadwood. It was a Western. No. I went back and watched it. There were 31-hour episodes. I spent 30 hours watching this thing. Like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
And then we wasted 7 hours of our life and watched those jackasses from Tiger King.
I was going to ask.
Recommendation. What a collection of nitwits that was. Like,
How about that place is open again?
I saw that.
And attracting big crowds too.
Crazy.
It's still that crazy guy, isn't it? That Joe, not the guy that came on afterwards with the poor fashion sense, the leather jackets and the Ed Hardy t-shirts.
I proudly have not seen an episode, and I'm not sure what you guys like. I know you guys are talking about, but I refuse.
Well, stay away.
I refuse to. Yeah.
For your own personal well-being.
Yeah.
You feel like you need a shower every time you wash that thing.
Just to save those hours. And Dregs, at least by your kid's age, hopefully you're out of the Fortnite stage then, because it's been a lot of that going on.
Yeah, there has been. My son, I think, still gets caught, in that rabbit hole once or twice a week. But we live next to a conservation forest, so one of the upsides is that he actually spends a lot of time in the forest. I don't know what he's doing in there. I have no idea. Hopefully it's legal, but he's at least getting some fresh air. You know what we did watch this weekend, Ray? I don't know if you guys have seen it, is Waco. And of course,
oh yes,
we all remember, what went down in Waco, Texas, and none of it was good. But holy smokes, I mean, it's one season, 6 episodes. So, I mean, you're driving straight up the mountain and then right over the cliff by episode 5. So if you're looking
now, is it actors, or do they have real footage, or what do they got?
Little of both.
Yeah,
a little of both. Yeah,
it was very well done. It actually got me going on, kind of a rabbit hole myself into YouTube, watching the old news clips and everything, and it was very. I thought it was pretty well done, but that to me was far more interesting and more educated than Tiger King. I'll tell you that much. My wife got through about 1 episode of Tiger King, and she looked at me and said, "I am out of here." And then every day when I watched it, I just could feel her staring at me from the island, like why are you wasting your time? Right? Exactly.
Yeah. See, my wife was the same with Deadwood, because Ray insisted that we try at least 1 episode. I was more into it. I felt like this was something that I could gravitate to, but you've got to have a pretty thick skin when it comes to the vocabulary of Deadwood, because there's some creative words being tossed around there.
Well, we're talking about video games. One of the questions I had sent to me was, if you're Ray's kids and they're playing the game, EA Sports, NHL, and Ray's doing the commentary and they got the TV up, is that Cammie's worst nightmare? Because she's got you talking in the kitchen and then the boys and you doing the commentary on the TV in the other room.
Well, actually, the boys put me on mute a lot, which is not even a story. That's true. But I can imagine that's not Cammie's favorite time of day. I will tell her she's not here right now, or she would confirm this. We went to, one of my favorite artists is James Taylor. And we went to this unbelievable outdoor concert James Taylor was playing. And so, of course, I'm singing all the songs. And I said, this must be unbelievable for you. You get to listen to him and you get to listen to me sing along. Terrible singer. Yeah, this is what I always hope for.
Do you talk in your sleep? Like, do you ever wake Cammie up at night, Ray, with, look at the speed of Connor McDavid? Just replaying some of the EA Sports you've been doing for hours and hours and hours.
No, apparently, I don't believe it, but apparently I snore a little bit.
Oh,
I don't get it. I don't think so. She's threatening a video.
That'd be a great part of the intro on the Ray and Dregs podcast. Nice little sound effect.
And as long as she knows that's a 2-way street, because my wife Holly used to threaten that all the time, and actually recorded me one time snoring. And I snore a lot, not a little. I snore. I get it. I understand it. But then I found some stuff that she does in her sleep, which I also recorded. And now we're even. Now the game isn't as fun anymore.
I will say this. If you're going to get into a game of screwing around with stuff like that, you don't want to be playing Dreger.
No.
Because he sent pictures of, of me eating and, like food's hanging out of my mouth. And he just sits over there and takes a picture and then just texts it to me. What are you doing? Why is this amusing to you?
Well, I have to admit, when the Ray and Dregs podcast dropped, I was one of several people in Brandon, especially the guys in the Wee King office, were excited. I love it. I think you guys have done a great job. But one of the kind of reoccurring themes I've heard a few times was 1983, and it was a great year for Ray Ferraro, and he scored 108 goals, and Dregs likes to make sure that everybody knows that that's the case. Ray, I'll give you a chance right now. What do you want to say to Dregs to maybe defend yourself a little bit about your 108 goals and what a great accomplishment it was?
Well, I think, and if I don't even know if Dregs scored 100 goals in all his years. So you are kind of, it's something to talk about. It's not like I'm saying, hey, I iced the puck 27 times in 1983, right? It actually worked out well. But so he knows this, and so he does it on purpose. So he always gets the number wrong. He knows it's 108. And so he'll say, oh, you got 107 and 109. He does it all the time. This started when we were in Hartford, and Paul McDermott was my roommate and my right winger. And he must have got tired of people asking and me telling this story. So wherever we would be, he would say, hey, didn't you get 105 goals? And I'd say, no, 108. And this went on, I'm telling you guys, for months. And then it finally dawned on me that, oh man, he knows how many goals it is. He's just making me say the number again. Because I caught him laughing as I was correcting himself. And I'm like, man, he just dragged me and he put the hook right in and dragged me in. I mean, I knew nothing about Brandon when I got there. Knew nothing. I had played one game there with Portland the year before, when the West goes through the East. Played the one game. I got traded with 4 other guys for a player named Blaine Crest. And so the only guys I knew were the guys in the trade. I got there the day before the first game. The only guy I'd heard of on the team was Ron Hextall. And then we started, and everything went perfectly.
I would, that is a record that'll never be touched. I can only imagine 192 points, still atop several Wheat King single season records. Ray, when you said you didn't know anything about Brandon, what were your first thoughts, when you rolled in? And I know you didn't really want to come to Brandon originally. When you got there and settled in, what were your first real thoughts of the Wheat City?
Well, what ended up happening was I flew into Winnipeg, and actually Dean Evason's older brother, Heavy, picked me up at the airport in Winnipeg. And Heavy who passed away some time ago, was just a fantastic guy, awesome guy. So he picks me up. I don't know him. We're driving in from Winnipeg, and I don't know, how far out from Brandon do you see the lights of Brandon?
Like 15 minutes, maybe?
Yeah. I would say 15, 20 minutes. I said, oh, is that Brandon? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, we're here. And he's like, not yet. I'd never been on the prairies, guys. Like, I didn't know anything about it. And I'm like, where are we going? And so I got there, whatever the first game was, it was either end of September, early October, and the weather was spectacular. And one of the guys on the team, Brad Duggan, who came in the trade from Portland, he had a Trans Am with the T-roofs. So we had the roofs off, and I'm like, man, everybody talks about the weather, how cold it gets here. This is awesome. And then, boom, winter came like October the 12th. And so I started playing. You're playing junior. You don't do anything. I wasn't in school. Sat around all day, hung out with Ron Hextall. We didn't have a gym. We didn't work out. We'd go to practice, come home, eat lunch. Our big go-to was craft dinner. And if we wanted some protein, we'd slice up some hot dogs in there. And Hexy had 115 penalty minutes and 15 assists. And I had my meal. My year, maybe we should have kept going with it. But everybody I loved it there. It was great. I played a lot. Our team was good. And it worked out. Honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened in my hockey career, was landing in Brandon.
So how did you two meet? What was that story?
Ray doesn't remember this. I actually interviewed Ray at least twice. And the first time, he looked at me like I was in fact, it was crowding Ray, right? He wasn't quite ready for the scrum. He was still getting his stuff off. And that was back in the day when they opened the rooms pretty quickly, right? So you had to be ready. And Ray was always excellent with the media. If you look back, through time, YouTube, there's lots of video interviews of Ray Ferraro. But I was standing in line ready to get into the scrum. and I was standing too close and I was crowding over you. Ray, you were sitting, taking your skates off, and looked up, and he's just, as Ray does, and he goes, "Can you give me a second?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I suppose I can." "A little room?" "Okay." And I backed up, and that was it. And then you stood up, and there was 4 or 5 other people in the scrum, and away we went. So that would have been the first time I encountered Ray. But in getting to know Ray, it would be through, I don't know, maybe the early days of Sportsnet, Ray, or through the cycle of ESPN back in the day, and then obviously a lot more closely during our time together at TSN.
So now we've heard about Ray's first encounter with Brandon. Now, Darren, let's go back to yours, because with yours, and by the way, with the media broadcast, if I remember correctly, did you also go to WABC in Saskatoon?
Yes, I did.
Yes,
I did.
Because so did I, and you were the poster boy. It was you and a couple other guys. I think Don Scott probably still has that poster up of you as one of the students there. But it was always fascinating to me going from there, hearing about you, and then coming here and working at the radio stations, and of course, hearing about a number of guys who went on to national careers, yourself, Millard, others. But how did it all come about, you getting your start, and how did it come to the Wheat City with the Wheat Kings as well?
Well, yeah, I was working at CJGX GX94 in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and my now wife, Holly, was graduating high school and had been accepted to Brandon University. So she was going in the fall of 1989. So I was thinking to myself, well, I mean, I if this is going to work out, I've got to get to either Brandon or Winnipeg. Had an opportunity to go to Winnipeg. And didn't take it. And then another opportunity came up to go to CKLQ in Brandon, and obviously I jumped on board there. So that was the start. I got to tell you, fellas, like I spent a lot of time clearly in Brandon, but I would not be sitting here today. I wouldn't have the career that I've enjoyed without the time that I spent in Brandon and getting to know the great people in hockey and around a very vibrant sports community. As you guys know, because you live it, it's not just about the Brandon Wheat Kings or hockey in that city. You have to pay attention to baseball and everything that's going on there. Curling is such an enormous sport in Manitoba and Western Canada as well, and the university sports. So I had to do all of that stuff, and wouldn't be where I am without enjoying the time that I spent in Brandon. I still have lots of friends back in Brandon. I don't get there as often as I'd like to, but nothing but great memories of the time spent in Brandon.
The alumni list, and Chris had touched on the WABC. Now, the Wheat Kings have a long list of alumni that have gone on to the NHL and had great careers, but CKLQ as well. Jim Houston was there for a brief bit. Of course, Darren Millard, he was there at the same time as you. You overlapped a little bit. Before that, Bucky Buchanan, who was a longtime voice of the Oilers, he was there. And back in the, I think, late 50s or early 60s, I can't remember the name of him off the top of my head. Dilly would know, but he left to go and be the TV guy for the Milwaukee Brewers. So there is quite the long list of guys that have gone from Q and moved on. I'm going to think and look at the list of who's still there. I would think the only staffer that might still be there would be Leanne Doty. Was she there when you were there back in the day?
Yeah, she was there. I'm trying to think. Steve Anteo was
He just
there.
retired, yeah.
Wow. Oh, my God. Bill
Turner.
was a morning guy. Bill Turner, of course. How can I forget wild old Billy? He was something else. We used to have a lot of fun doing that morning show. But, yeah, Leanne Doty was there for sure. Yeah.
She's running the morning show still to this day.
Awesome.
And then
40 years later.
And now one of our favorite things was every time there's the TSN cut-in, it's that bobblehead sitting right behind you right now, the Dinger bobblehead.
Damn.
So when we got that bobblehead made, we asked the company, we need the biggest actual head and shoulders of any bobblehead you could give, because he was just a man playing among boys. But, just kind of talk about why that bobblehead sits there.
Oh, well, look, Dinger is one of the guys that I think of so fondly in terms of my developmental years in broadcasting. And there were a few. I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff was a great leader for the Brandon Wheat Kings. And, I've known him basically all of our adult lives. But Dinger and I used to share a row on the Brandon Wheat Kings bus. And, I mean, he was an enormous human being. He still is. So I'd sneak in pizza. I mean, I'd get the same amount of food that every player on the Wheat Kings team got. You know, we'd stop at Elkhorn, and the ladies always had this unbelievable smorg, this buffet set up. And Dinger would say, "Hey, get more, because I'm hungry." You know, and he didn't want Kelly McCrimmon or anybody to know that he was eating as much as he was eating. So I always stayed in touch with Dinger, and he obviously enjoyed an unbelievable and fortunate NHL career with the Stanley Cup wins and whatnot. But so I've got a few bobbleheads, but that one isn't going anywhere. That one's going into the vault here when I retire. That one's staying with me.
You touched on life on the bus, Dregs, and I imagine, Ray, for you going from Portland, where the travel's pretty minimal and short, everything's pretty close, to Brandon, that first long bus trip where you say you're going to Edmonton or Calgary, what were you thinking? And did you pack enough to keep yourself occupied, whether it be magazines or crosswords, or what were you doing to keep busy?
Well, in Portland, the year I was there was just 5 teams in the Western Division. So we played everybody like 13 times. So you'd go to Kelowna and then to Kamloops, but mostly we were in Seattle, which was 2.5 hours, and a trip to Victoria. That was it. Like it was easy. So I get to Brandon. First home and home was Winnipeg. They still had a team at the time, and that wasn't bad. I'm like, I didn't even really think of it. But then all of a sudden you start getting stretched out, and you get in. It was always so much fun going into Saskatoon and Regina, and you finish the trip in Prince Albert. And you'd get up there, and Dave Manson and Ken Baumgartner waiting for you. And then you'd get, you get pummeled around for the weekend, and then you bus back. And then our bus, I don't know when they would have retired this thing, but the bus it had two bunks on each side in the back. And the vets got the bunks. So I shared a bunk with Hexie. And so my head was at one end of the bunk and Hexie's head was at the other, but he was way taller. So when he'd be kicking around in his sleep, like, I'd be getting his knee right in my, it's not exactly the most comfortable bus ride around, but we had the bunks. Everybody else is on this old springless bus, and enough food. I mean, I don't know, how much McDonald's can you eat? How much, whatever we were eating, right? Like, I don't even remember, but you talk about the one stop there, Dregs, that you'd go in and there would be a meal, a buffet, and you'd get that. That was just to get you, because you had 8 hours to go. I scored 7 goals one night against Prince Albert in Brandon. We played the next night in Calgary. And I remember we lost 9-2. And about halfway through the second period, somebody for Calgary were lined up at a draw. And of course, there's no internet back then. Someone, whoever it was, goes, "Did you score 7 goals last night?" Like like the news just got there. Like, in front of our bus. And then, of course, our coach was Jack Sangster, and he's like, "You guys got to dig in. Dig in? We just did 13 hours. We got nothing."
Well, we still stop in Elkhorn. I can tell you that, Dregs. The tradition continues. Every time the bus goes to Regina, Moose Jaw, and the odd time Saskatoon, depending on the travel. Dave Lowry, this was his first experience in Elkhorn. And so Dave, obviously coming from LA preseason, we pulled into Elkhorn, and there's a full turkey dinner, stuffing, potatoes, gravy, chocolate cake. And he looked around and said, "Well, I'm not in LA anymore." That was the first thing he said. But by the end, he was going back for seconds. He absolutely loved it.
I love that stop came up, because whenever we post that on social media, when we do that stop as well, all the alumni, that's like the one post they want to chirp in on, because they all remember that stop and just how amazing that meal that those ladies put on.
Look, it's not even a fair comparison, because Elkhorn is so much better than anything else. But my second favorite stop on that tour, and I don't know that this restaurant is still active, it was a TNT in Swift Current. All right. And the only reason it matters
it's
is
Houston's
because,
now, I think, isn't it?
All right. Well, next time you talk to Kelly McCrimmon, you got to ask him about this, because you remember Mark Johnson used to be an assistant coach with the Brandon Wheat Kings back in the day.
I just saw him today. He's actually on our scouting staff.
Awesome. Johnny, say hello for me, because he's good people. And we'd go into the TNT, and they had a buffet style meal as well. but they'd have like chicken cutlets, and he'd stack them like pancakes, and then he'd pour the gravy over the stack of cutlets, and automatically he'd have one eye that would go all wonky. And so at one point, I'm sitting across the table laughing at him, and I'm like, it's like you got wing eye or something. Every time you get hungry and you're just so looking forward to this meal, your eye starts to twitch. So the next time you see Kelly, just ask him about Johnny's wing eye from the TNT and Swift Current.
Done.
One of the great things about the Wheat King logo, and you guys both know this, and I think, Ray, about 2 years ago, you and Gord were in Edmonton getting set to do a Toronto-Edmonton game, and we were unpacking in the visitor locker room, and you guys happened to walk by, and you guys stopped in and said a few words to the group, which was awesome. But every time we go somewhere, the logo is so noticeable, and it brings up such a discussion point because of guys like you, Ron Hextall and Kelly McCrimmon and all the current players and all the alumni that go along with it. Is that a regular talking point at different rinks? Because I imagine it's hard, I'll start with you, Dregs, to go to a rink and not run into somebody who somewhere along the line had something to do with the Brandon Wheat Kings.
Yeah, no question about that. And it often is brought up. Chris Phillips had, his sweater retired by the Ottawa Senators earlier in the season. And obviously there was a good group there. And lots of the stories revolve around the fact that, he played a ton in the Western Hockey League, starting with the Prince Albert Raiders. But Wade Redden, of course, was there and in helping celebrate that night. And man, we shared a dozen different great stories. So, there's connections. And given the history of Ray and what he did in a Brandon Wheat Kings uniform, the Brandon Wheat Kings and that history often comes up because on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, some of our best shows, and Ray, you can jump in on this, are based on, the stories that happened, not only in the National Hockey League, but dating back to, the infamous brawl in the WHL way back in the day and whatnot. So that always finds a way to circle back to Brandon in some fashion.
For myself, I'm always connected to Hexy through that year. I mean, we were talking this year and like, we've known each other now for over 30 years. And we're like, man, like, how did we come together? Just like it was, that trade could have been made me to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. Like Hex was already a mainstay. And so we see each other, we start to talk, we reminisce, we talk about somebody else that we played with or played against. Somebody will come along and then pretty soon you're as Dregs mentioned, you're in a bigger conversation. And so we had Dean Evison on our podcast. And of course, Dean is from Brandon or Flin Flon, but then into Brandon, and so much connection through the Manitoba hockey scene. The other thing about the Wheat Kings is the logo really, although there's been a couple of changes to it over time, it's never really changed.
Yeah.
So everybody knows it. It's like there's certain teams that don't change. The ones that change all the time, in my opinion, lose their history.
Yeah.
They lose their connection. And while the Wheat Kings have had a couple of different logos or changed it up, the font in the logo or things like that, it's never really changed. And I think that matters. Now, somebody this year, I was watching the 1983, I guess, Montreal, Quebec playoff series. And it just erupted into 3 wild brawls at the end of the second period. And so I tweeted out that I was watching it. And somebody sent me about 10 seconds of footage of a brawl we had in Regina. And like, you can't even believe it. First of all, there's no glass in the penalty box. Stu Grimson's in the penalty box. And when Hexy clunks their goalie with his stick doesn't even make contact, and Grimson jumps over the penalty box. So the brawl's on again. So I sent it to Hex, and I go, because Hexy got 8 games. He had 8 game suspension. We were outraged. He would have got 8 years if that was him. And so I said, Hexy, you can't do that. And he said, I know, you should get 10 games for jumping out of the penalty box. But we're looking at it, and we all like have such fondness for that time, because for a lot of us, hey, look, Dregs' career was a springboard in Brandon. It started and grew. Mine started and grew from Brandon. I came to Brandon wondering if I could be an NHL player, and I left, and I was like, you know what, I can do this. I can go play. Now I just got to make it.
Yeah, it's so cool to see all of the paths and the different directions, whether it be the trainers, equipment managers, coaches, assistant coaches that have all started somewhere. I mean, obviously the Vegas staff right now, you got Ryan Craig on there who probably would have overlapped a little bit with you, Dregs, at some point in the 90s, late 90s. But, for you two guys, especially to reach the pinnacle of where you're at and now into the, I guess I want to say the back nine of this media career for you two guys. Is it at all what you expected? Like, Ray, when you were winding down, did you say, I'm going to be on TV? Or were you one that was like, might get into coaching? What was your mindset as you were getting close to retiring?
So I got really lucky. I signed with the Rangers as a free agent. And later that year, I got traded. I was not very happy, but I got traded to Los Angeles. So LA was out of the playoffs. I got a phone call from a guy at ESPN named Barry Sachs. And Barry turned out to be a mentor and a friend and a really great supporter for me. And he called and said, hey, would you like to, once the season's over, would you like to come to ESPN and work on NHL Tonight, the highlight show? And I said, well, I don't know. I've never done anything before. And he's like, look, I've seen you do interviews for years. I think you could be good at this. Would you like to try? So I said, sure, I'll come. So I went for 2 weeks. My first day, I finished. I mean, there's only 2 cameras, right, in the studio. One's got a red light on, one doesn't. You talk to the one with the red light. It's not, it's not that hard. I was so nervous, guys. I had sweat stains from my elbows to my waist. I was scared to death. And so, but it turned out pretty good because when I finished, they said, next year, we want you to come back for longer. So the broadcasting kind of just fell into my lap. But I always thought I would coach or manage. And so I thought when I retired in May of 2002, and I started working for Sportsnet doing the Edmonton Oilers games in October of 2002. So, just the off season. So I thought I would do that for a little bit and then get into coaching. But I'd gotten divorced and I wasn't going to move away from my older boys who are now 31 and 28. And so broadcasting became what I was going to do. And then I don't know that I had any real plans, but all of a sudden I was doing it all the time. I love the games. I love being live. I much prefer it to studio, and my career just kind of grew from there. I got again, it's timing and luck, and then you do something with both of those. I guess I did a good enough job that they brought me back. I love it. It's been 18 years now, and I can't believe it.
You know what? And essentially the same for me. It is timing and it is luck, as Ray talks about. I was in Winnipeg, working at CKY Television, and had pretty much had enough. I mean, the Winnipeg Jets had been pulled out of Winnipeg, and they were now the Phoenix Coyotes, and I was like, what am I doing here? I'm not making enough money. Maybe this is the end of the line for me. And in fact, I actually signed up to get my real estate license, and I was moving back to Brandon in 97. My wife was teaching high school in Brandon, and that was my plan. I was going to get out of the business and move back to Brandon to become a highly successful real estate agent. And in the meantime, my boss at CKY ended up moving to Edmonton to become the general manager of then A Channel. And he called me in 97, the summer of 97, and he said, hey, look, I need a sports director. I need somebody to come in who's going to host the Edmonton Oilers games on A Channel. Are you interested? And of course I said, well, yeah, I'm going to go. And that's exactly what I did. I spent 10 months in Edmonton doing doing the TV thing for A Channel and hosting Edmonton Oilers games. And in 1998, timing and opportunity was there again. And I was part of the launch crew that is now Sportsnet. So timing is everything, as they say.
Just think, Drake, that's one phone call. That one phone call changed the course of everything for you.
100% everything. Absolutely everything. I had signed up to take this course. I was dealing with agents in Brandon who were telling me, okay, look, it's not that difficult. You'll be fine. We've got a spot for you here. I think the guy's name is Brad Munn. Is Brad Munn still there?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Well, there you go. So that's how things change with, as Ray says, a simple phone call. And without that phone call, obviously I wouldn't be sitting here, but I might be sitting where you are, Brandon. So
See, here's the thing though, Dregs. Had you gotten your real estate license, you'd have been competing with the mogul and former teammate of Ray Ferraro, Cam Plant, who is now one of Brandon's biggest real estate guys. So you would have been battling with him.
I'm glad he's doing that, but man, could that guy pass the puck.
His assist numbers alone speak for themselves.
I think he had 118 assists the year that I got 108 goals, and I'd stand there and Cam would kind of like doom doom doom, you know, he'd always hold the puck. Never a heartbeat, like never. Nothing was gonna bug him, and then all of a sudden, zip! It would be right on my stick. Like, oh, he could pass the puck, man.
One of the questions I got, Ray, texted to me from one of my buddies. Now, obviously, growing up in Manitoba, we got a lot of Oiler games, a lot of regional games. For whatever reason, Oiler games weren't blacked out in Boissevain, Manitoba when I was growing up. It seemed like everything east was. But one of our favorite Ray Ferraro moments was the Patrick Stefan missed empty net. Now, I know that the stereotype of Ray Ferraro is kind of the crotchety, grumpy old man that Dregs portrays you as.
Yes, he does.
But were you actually visibly upset at Patrick Stefan? Because it sure sounded like.
I'll tell you, I was really angry because I played with Patrick for almost 3 years in Atlanta. And everything about that play seemed familiar. Like, okay, so he's got a breakaway on an empty net. Right? Everybody else in the rink has fallen over. He's an NHL player. Just shoot it in the damn net. But he took it in and he was going to just like touch it softly into the net. Everything about Patty, and I will tell you, he is about as nice a person as you could come across. And that was not good for being a professional hockey player. So the play was so soft, like he's just trying to touch it in on his backhand. That bothered me like you couldn't believe. I'm like, Patty, just shoot it in the damn net. And then, of course, when he fell, to make matters worse, now he's panicking, and he ends up putting it right on the tape. I forget who got it first.
Was it Ryan Smith maybe took it up the left wing? And
no, somebody threw a long pass to Smith, got it, gave it to Hemsky. It might have been Jarrett Stoll. It was. Stoley got it and just fired this long bomb up the air because there was only 5 seconds left. Shoot it in the net. Yes, I was mad.
Did he ever say anything to you? That's the question was, did Patrick Stefan ever say anything to you about that?
No, I'd say a couple of years later, I ran into him at an airport, and that's Patty. Like he was like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, hey, Patty, how are you? Good to see you. He coaches minor hockey. His kids are getting older, and he's doing great. But I was angry. I was. Look,
I think you still are a little bit.
Now, yes, just shoot it in the net. There's not too much that gets me angry anymore. I don't have much anymore. It's like, I don't know, doing it. You don't want to, guy doesn't want to shake hands after a series. I don't care. Don't shake hands. It's up to you. I don't care.
Are you referring to Isaiah Thomas by chance?
No, yeah, well, that was something. Okay, put it this way. There is nobody, like Michael Jordan hates Isaiah Thomas 30 years later. Like, seriously, get past it.
Yeah.
That's not, I was a certain way, I think. I felt like my whole career I had to fight. I was too small, too slow, not tough enough. Everywhere I went, it was the same thing. And it sat like right here. And I felt like I fought that all the time. And it took me a long time to walk past that. And, Cammie's just walking in here now, but like she's helped me a great deal getting past that because I couldn't stop, man. It's like Jordan's hyper competitiveness. I see it. I can see it. It's work for me. We play Scrabble. I don't know that I've ever beat her. Bugs me like you can't believe. But I finally am able to take it and go, yeah, she's just better than me. But before, no chance. There was no chance. And don't let Dregs kid you. It's not like he's, Charlie Carefree either.
Dregs, very competitive yourself?
Yeah, I can be competitive. No question about that. Like Ray, I've mellowed over time. Hey, look, well, I'm a bit of a dog on a bone. I think that makes sense. When I'm on to something, I will stop at nothing to make sure that I find out what I'm looking for. And there's lots of that. But, as soon as Ray talked about losing to Cami and Scrabble, I just had to bring this up. So I've got a 21-year-old daughter who just finished her third year at Ryerson in Toronto. She's going to be a lawyer. And my son just finished his first year at Guelph. He wants to be a lawyer. So it doesn't come from me. These kids are smart. That it clearly comes from my wife. I won 3 of 5 Scrabble games yesterday. 3 of 5 against that group.
Okay, now do you know all those? I think it's almost cheating.
The 2-letter words?
The 2-letter words and things. Do you know those?
I know a lot of them. Yes.
Yeah, well, why don't you use any? Because they're not even really words.
Hey, I am an absolute hound when it comes to the triple word score or the triple letter. Or anything.
She'll put down 3 letters and go, tick, 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 47. Yeah. I'm like, well, the game's over. Like, well, I can't do that. It's not even a word. I think they should be banned.
That's probably that's a poor argument for the whole NCAA versus Western Hockey League thing.
It really is. Isn't
Your
it?
wife had a lot more classroom time than you did, I think, to learn the words.
I think if you don't use the word in everyday speech, you can't put it on a Scrabble board.
That's a good rule.
I just invented that. It would give me a chance. But 3 out of 5 drinks.
I argued. I used the word Dixie, Dixie, and it was for like 52 points, right? Because there's the X in there, and it was on a triple word and all of this. And we had a sound debate over whether or not it was a usable word. But there's actually something you can Google that tells you immediately whether or not it is a Scrabble acceptable word. And it was. I knew it was. Nobody else knew it was, but I knew it was. So
I'm sure once you found out it was a usable word, though, I'm sure you dealt with it with great humility.
Oh.
If you look at those cupboards, have like prison markings of all of his wins in behind him.
Pretty much.
So we were talking about like how great the Wheat King logo was, but Ray, you've worn a lot of great logos over your career. What are some that stick out among your journey?
Well, I think the Whaler jersey is one of the best ever created.
I'm very glad that you started there because that's where I was going to start as well.
So, like, obviously you look at it and there's the whale tail across the top, there's the H and then the W, and I think it's an incredibly creative jersey. Now, our minor league team was in Binghamton, so they just took the jersey and twisted it. So it was a B. We were in Binghamton.
Oh.
And so we said in the American League, we were a quarter turn from the NHL. I love that jersey. I thought it was awesome. I like the tradition of the Rangers, like wearing the red pants and stuff, that you felt like you were in a big place. The St. Louis Blues logo is amazing. I love the blue note. I think the color scheme of the Islanders was my favorite, though. I like the orange and the blue and the way it all came together. That crest was just it was iconic, really, that once they won the Stanley Cups. The worst jersey I wore, not even close, was the LA Kings jersey. It had the Joker. It was like do you guys remember that?
Yeah,
it was
I think I do, yeah.
We were so embarrassed to put this thing on. It looked like the Burger King guy.
Right.
It did.
It was terrible. Like you could have ordered 2 Whoppers and gone out for the warm-up. That was by far the worst jersey that we put on. And because the NHL wasn't the same as it is now, we had black and silver gloves. These jerseys were purple and yellow and gray. Like none of the gloves or the helmets or the pants matched. Nobody had any shells, right? So you had mismatched uniforms. It was terrible. We looked like a bunch of clowns.
I wanted to ask both of you, it's pretty simple. From Dreger's perspective, best and worst Western Hockey League broadcast locations, and then Ray, best and worst arena to play in the Western Hockey League.
Oh,
You got to be careful because I'm sure you've got fans in both cities. But
you know what? I got to go back. So Swift Current was a bit sketchy. If memory serves, I think you had to climb a ladder to
you still
get into
do.
it. Yeah, but you're pretty close to the ice, so the vantage is fine. That's not a big deal. The worst for me was the Tacoma Dome in Tacoma, Washington, and it was like a soccer facility. So you had the long drawn out seating arrangement. So nobody told me, Rick Delabo didn't tell me you need to take binoculars to call the Tri-City Americans and the Brandon Wheat Kings. And I mean, my eyesight was pretty good. I was a young man back then. If I had to call that game now, forget about it. I mean, there's no way you could see the players from that vantage point. So that probably was the toughest one for me.
For me, not by far because it's a tie, the worst arena in the Western League, thankfully they're both out of there now, is the old building in Saskatoon.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know who thought it was a really good idea that the doors would open out onto the ice. The benches, the doors would open on the ice. Like, who thought that was a good idea? There'd be somebody going down, there'd be a change, boom, the guy would skate right into the door. Like, it was brutal. But that was only in a tie with the old rink in Seattle. So that dump had kind of square corners. And so they had a rubber stopper around the boards so the Zamboni could get in there and it would hug the rubber stopper. So you'd be going down the boards and somebody'd rub you out and your shoulder would stick on this rubber and all of a sudden your feet would be like up at your head. And there was no glass. It was all chicken wire all the way around. So when we went in there with Portland, it was a gong show in there. And all the fans that sat by the ice, they were all like 25-year-old or a little younger college people. There'd be fights going on. You'd get hit in the back with a beer. Like they just throw it right through the screen on you. You smelled like a brewery. Our bench smelled like a brewery by the end of the period. The best like Portland was beautiful. It was the Memorial Coliseum and that it was a pretty brand new facility. I loved it in Brandon. The ice was always great. The fans were close, and we did well. So I would say those were my two favorite rinks.
Did they still have the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair in Brandon when healthy enough to host this event?
Of course, yeah. This was the first year they've never not had it in the 100 whatever so many years they've been doing it.
And is that normally in March?
It's first round of playoffs. Every year.
Yeah, every year. So of course, if the Wheat Kings don't get home ice, then we have to play not in our building. So
yeah. Well, I always remembered the complaining afterwards, right? Because you'd get that lovely aroma of cow, horse, livestock in general.
That is the true home ice advantage, Travis.
Agricultural money. Come on.
Yes, exactly.
I said to Mark Habscheid one time before a game against P, I said, what was it like to play here? And he said, it was awful because the second you got off the bus, if you were a city kid, that smell got in your nose and you just couldn't get rid of it for the whole game. Ray, the other question I had here actually came from my father-in-law, who said that when back in the 80s, you guys had to play a preseason game or a regular season game, he couldn't remember, in the town of Verdun. Now, you were on that roster. Now, that rink's no longer here. That's where I live. I live on a farm just north of Verdun. The rink's gone. They've built a new one. But he said you guys had to play in the building, and it was packed to the rafters with people. But he couldn't remember if it was regular season or preseason. Do you remember anything about that?
Regular season. And I forget why we didn't have the rink at home. Now, could it have been?
It probably could have been the fair.
Because of the fair.
Could have been.
It was, I know it was late in the year, and I remember we were like, why are we going? This is crazy. We were, it was late. We needed the points. And that place, and I want to say that rink, could it have been 1,000 people?
Yeah, maybe if you crammed them in, yeah.
And it was packed. There was people hanging out of everywhere. And of course, when you're the home team, that's a good thing. The visitors came in there and they're probably like, wait a minute. I can't remember who we played, but yeah, that was regular season for sure.
That's awesome. That's a memory that I know that a lot of people have mentioned to me in the past. Ray Ferraro played in the building, and nobody could remember why, what was going on.
It had to be because of the fair. Like it had to be.
Yeah.
I just can't think of another reason why we wouldn't have had the rink.
Must have been the fair. That thing's kicked the Wheat Kings out of very opportune home ice advantage in the playoffs. I'd be going into my 5th year, and I've called one home playoff game at the Keystone Center. Everything else has been in Dauphin. We were scheduled to play in Verdun again, and the new rink had the team not gotten home ice advantage this year. It's been a trying time since the championship season to get home ice advantage. So got to get that fair. You'll never move it. It was here first.
No.
I was going to say, you got to get it to move. I guess what? You're not going to win that one.
No, you're not.
Well, we should wrap things up. Chris, you got any other questions or anything for these fellas?
Well, before we do, we have to do the make a face because we got to get our thumbnail set for this video portion.
Right.
So we're going to count to 3, and you guys can make whatever face you want. If you want to be super serious, keep it straight-faced. If you want to give us a smile, it's up to you. But we're going to do it on the count of 3. So here we go. Make a face.
You're going to have to do better than that.
In 1, 2, 3. All right, there you go.
I just got a text, Ray, from a longtime Wheat King fan. He said it was a playoff game against the Lethbridge Broncos. He just texted me that.
And so it had to be for the fair.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, there you go. So it definitely would have been the fair.
So people remember this.
Does he know this?
Joel, if you're listening, do you know the score? Ray wants to know.
All right, and then maybe one last question, and obviously Aaron here is also, like us, a listener to your guys' podcast. He wants to know the best and worst smoker dinner.
The worst smoker dinner?
Yeah, the best and worst smoker dinner.
Like, is that a hobby for
Dregs?
With your smoking.
He's such a
dinner.
barbecue chef. You know, he's such a...
Oh!
He's spending all of his time smoking, yes, with the dinner.
Yeah, sorry,
Smoked
I was
meats.
not following.
Like he was like smoking a cigarette here.
No,
Yeah.
no.
yeah.
I mean, again, at the top of the podcast about smoking meat. And anyway.
For the skill apparently it takes, he's probably doing it right now.
No. Calm down. Now, look at least in Saskatchewan, you go to curling events and whatever else, and they'd have a party, like a gathering afterwards, and they'd call it a smoker. So it was like a get together. So that's why I was confused. I was like, what are you talking about? What kind of smoker dinner are we talking about? I do a pretty mean brisket, man. I'm not going to lie. And in fact, I've got one already set up. It'll be going on the smoker either Saturday or Sunday. Good 8.5 hours at around 220 degrees, and a little apple wood on the charcoal, and you're set. So as long as you're there to babysit, I know Ray makes fun of me, doesn't think there's anything to it. You just set it and forget it. That's not necessarily the case. There's actually.
What do you do? I'm still like, what do you do? You go and stare at it. Yeah, it's still fire's still burning. Then you go back to the house.
You have to keep it to within a set temperature, like somewhere between 220 and 235 is optimal.
What do you do to do that? Nothing.
No, you got to work the vents. You got to shake up the coals. You got to make sure that you put enough charcoal initially on there to sustain the fire, because
okay, so educate me here. Once you get it started, right, and you've done the thingy-majiggy,
what's the first thing I do?
Are you doing anything to it? Looking at it and going, yep, still good.
It depends how nice it is outside. If it's a nice enough day, then it's probably about a 4 beer smoke. So I don't want to get caught drinking too many beers. So I do a lot in that 4 or 5 hour span of whatever it is. If it's not very nice out, again, I'll look. I actually have an electronic thermometer that I carry with me. So if it drops or goes beyond that 235, an alarm goes off on my belt, and then I got to go down and check it out.
I picture it like a holster for an old cowboy, and he's just got this thermometer in one and barbecue sauce in the other.
You know, there's some old timers listening that are just they're disgusted with you, Joe.
Ray. You have to spend your time somehow these days. You have to spend your time somehow.
Joel replied, he said he doesn't remember the score, but Brandon did win that playoff game against Lethbridge. So you guys did win. Speaking of smokers, Dregs, on Saturday night, I had smoked bear for the first time. It was a bear shoulder that my brother-in-law then pulled into kind of a pulled pork style sandwich. I would recommend that. I don't think you can get it at a restaurant anywhere, but I would recommend it if you ever got the chance at a outfitter or a hunter. It was fantastic.
You know what? I'm an Eastern snob now. I don't eat animals that scavenge. I'm sorry. I'm like that with fish. I barely eat lobster because I found out 5 or 6 years ago that a lobster, I know it lives on the bottom of the ocean, but it eats all the fish feces and everything else. So that automatically threw me off my game. So
You still have like jumper though, eh? Like venison, you still take that.
oh, buddy, you mix that with pork, you make sausage. Absolutely. Moose, elk, deer, any of that, I'm good. I don't know.
Where do you think they eat? The restaurant?
You can keep your Western Canadian card. Bear is off the menu over here as well. I don't know what that's about.
It was good.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to what was that?
There'll be no bear in the Ferraro house.
Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your night to come on and talk to you guys here. I really do appreciate it, obviously.
You bet, fellas. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. And maybe next winter when we're hopefully back to something, whatever normal is, we can do it again.
Stay safe, fellas.
That would be awesome.
Well, guys.
Yeah, guys.
All right, so now comes the awkward part. We're live. We are going to kick you guys out here. So we're going to go like this. We're going to say goodbye to Ray. Bye, Ray. And we are going to say, all right, goodbye. See ya. Awesome.
All right. That
There
was
we
great.
go. Well, that's going to do it for the Weekly Harvest podcast for this week. Another great episode. Thank you very much, Crow. Are we going to let them know who we got next week, or are we going to keep that a secret for now?
We may as well. We kind of made a theme of letting people know. We're sticking with the broadcaster theme next week. Now, this is a guy not many people probably around Manitoba know. He's not really a household name, but he's arguably one of the best radio broadcasters in the NHL. Dan Duva. He's the voice of the Vegas Golden Knights on radio, and he reached out. We're going to have him on next week. He's got some great stories. Of course, he's worked very closely with Kelly McCrimmon and the crew there. Ryan Craig and Ryan Reeves and Mark Stone, and he's got a ton of Wheat King connections as well. So Dan Duva, the radio voice of the Vegas Golden Knights, will be our guest next week. And if you want to see a guest, send us an email. Send either one of us a tweet, qweeklyharvest@gmail.com. Throw a suggestion our way, and we'll reach out and see what we can come up with.
There it is. You know what? We did not time this. I should have said this because it's going to look like we were so pro. As you were giving out the email, I put up the email on the screen. It was
a well-oiled
It was
machine.
beautiful timing. If only it was actually planned that way. But qweeklyharvest@gmail.com. Again, send us an email. Drop it there. I'll be back live again next Monday at 8 o'clock. Or if you're listening to this during whenever you want, traditional podcast means, we appreciate that as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again next Monday.
See ya.